Hello, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming. Welcome to my session around considerations for HA and DR in a world of as a service, or what could be new to you, the world of as a service. What are we actually going to be doing? What on earth is going on here? All right, there's a little animation came up on this tiny screen. Is this going to go? There we go. Okay, so who am I? Sean Corrigan. I'm a returning speaker who wasn't aware not to wear the jumper, apologies. Spent about 15 years in the end user space. In my most recent previous role, I've been at Nerdio 6 months, but in my previous role, I worked at a very large Swiss financial where we successfully migrated about 110,000 users from various on-premises locations globally into 14 different Azure regions. It was a very big project. It was a very painful project. We went through a lot of pain, but similarly, we also learned a lot of really good things as part of that. Now I'm an enterprise sales engineer at Nerdio. If you want to hear more about the stuff we do at Nerdio, come and find us later, because you won't find out in this presentation. And mainly, apologies in advance. When I first started putting this together, I thought it was going to be a fully technical session, and I thought it was going to be around what are the things that you need to do to begin protecting yourself when you're building environments, virtual desktop environments, whatever they look like in cloud. And it very quickly became apparent that actually the biggest takeaway that I've been having with customers in the last 6 months is actually the way that we do things generally as we move to cloud is now completely changed. And the fundamental items and the things we're having to worry about and how we begin protecting ourselves from certain situations actually have also completely changed. So apologies from me in advance. If you're looking for a super deep technical session, this isn't going to be it. This is more around how we begin to change our thinking and our approaches to our environments, and actually how that has an impact on how you're providing and handling DR and how you view things, and how the thinking around things that perhaps you're doing on-prem today, or perhaps you're already on that journey to cloud, how you can begin to think about, actually, you know what, maybe I need to change my thinking on this a little bit. What are the things that are really important, and what bits can I kind of get away with in terms of protection there? Okay, so who are we? That is the royal we, that is us. I think most of the people here today are in the end user industry in one form or another. We've got quite a tough job. Probably not as tough as working 12-hour shifts endlessly with people's lives on the line. I don't know if anyone's doing end user in healthcare, but perhaps that's more stressful. But we have to make a lot of people happy at work. It's a really tough brief. Like it's a difficult place to be. It's quite rewarding, at least I think it is. So who are we? So we're a group of people. We all work in the IT and computing industry. That's kind of quite general. We also work with diverse technologies. Again, that's quite general. There's quite a lot of disciplines within IT where we're working with multiple sets of diverse technologies. We also specialize in end-user computing. That's kind of why we're here. It's kind of does exactly what it says on the tin. This is the EUC Forum. And worst of all, we have to work with end users. I'm joking. End users are great most of the time. But it throws up a number of potentially quite tricky situations, and it's not easy to make all of the people happy all of the time. And I think that's kind of my initial takeaway is when the chips are down and when you are entering a HRDR type scenario, it can be tricky to get people back to 100% of what they're kind of used to having. And I think my point here is that the approach can be different now, and the things that we were doing maybe 5 or 10 years ago potentially have changed a little bit in our industry. So who are we? Given that we have we work in a specialized field with specialized knowledge, we work in specialized use cases, with a lot of knowledge that we've acquired over a long period of time. We are basically Liam Neeson in Taken. So again, like I said, apologies. I really thought that I was going to deliver a session around kind of deep technical advice around individual components and how you could begin protecting those and what the best strategies were. And as I was finishing up a previous presentation and thinking about some of the work that I was doing at Nerdio, over the last 6 months, since I've been at Nerdio, the one thing that really surprised me is how many customers want to begin talking about HA and DR for their solution, and they don't start off with a holistic conversation or holistic questions. They start off with questions like, how am I going to back up the key vault for your solution? And there's nothing wrong with that, and it's entirely understandable. I think a lot of us in that room, in this room, have a great amount of experience. And we've learned from mistakes in the past, and by asking these questions, it kind of feels like we're getting a bit of coverage there so that we don't have to run into those mistakes again, and avoid them moving forwards. The real problem with that approach is that during the chats, they wanted to pull in a lot of their good logic and good knowledge and the things that they'd done before from their on-premises solutions without really finding out if they were relevant or applicable to what they were doing in cloud. And when we were having these discussions, we were constantly pivoting from questions like, how do I back up SQL? How do I back up the key vault? To things like, why do you need to do this specifically? Are you aware of how this component works and how it fits into the delivery of your end user platform? So I'm going to go back to Liam Neeson in Taken. We've established we all have a very particular set of skills, acquired over a very long career. But because of that, it can be quite difficult to break away from some of the stuff that we're used to doing. And hopefully we're going to cover a few concepts today that might help you view things through a new lens when it comes to how you kind of view and approach these conversations and your kind of end user solution in cloud generally. Okay. Does anyone know who this is? I know Anita does. This is Admiral Grace Hopper. She's an amazing woman. Amazing, endless list of achievements, accomplishments, influences across IT, an absolute legend. If you haven't heard of her, please make sure you turn up to Anita's talk later today. I'm sure she'll have lots to say about Grace and many other legends of IT in her talk at the end of the day. Come back to my main point. Grace Hopper is an absolute legend. And she was really at the forefront of computing for a very long time, and she said a lot of really interesting things. She's got loads of quite famous one-liners, but I've kind of picked out my top 3 here, which I think are probably my favorites. You have to remember that when she said these things, she kind of made these statements in the 60s. And the fact that for me they still ring true today is kind of incredible, and the fact that they're still supremely relevant, because I've just seen too many environments that have been implemented because this is how we've always done it, and that potentially is a quite dangerous approach to use when you're moving to cloud for your end user solutions. So another mistake that people make, in my humble opinion, you're free to disagree, it's an open forum, is when they're looking at their kind of end user compute designs, when they're looking at their platforms, when they're looking at building a design, and it's not necessarily anyone's fault, I just think it's kind of how we used to build these kind of environments. We kind of go in at the deep end. We look very deep into kind of what servers we're using, what does the network look like, what does the storage look like, what individual resources are we running, and we're kind of applying that methodology to what we're doing in cloud. That's fine, like I said, it's totally understandable. It's kind of where we feel really comfortable. It's what we've kind of grown up with and what we're used to. But you know what, lifting and shifting directly from cloud, or directly into cloud from on-prem, sorry, is just not something that I can really recommend in any way. I would only really say you can get away with that if you're time dependent, you have to get something in and you can't afford to test new technologies and make any changes. That, I guess, is an acceptable approach, but the only thing I can guarantee by doing a full lift and shift from on-prem into cloud is that your cloud provider account manager will have a great Christmas, because doing that is a very expensive way to get your resources into cloud without changing any of your solution. So you're not going to have your servers, you're not going to have your painful network stuff, and you're not going to have your storage, but you're also not going to have to kind of worry about any of those things anymore, which is a real positive for me. Really sorry, I'm just going to pause and have a water. Apologies for that. So I guess what am I saying? I'm saying, that basically you are going to have to let go of some things here. That you're going to have to let go of the way that you used to do things and the way that you used to approach things. I'm a quite hardcore physical server virtualization guy. I grew up lifting tin and shifting stuff around in data centers. I like touching pieces of kit. Moving to cloud was not an enjoyable experience for me, so I get it. But the truth is, when you move to cloud, the way you do things have to change, because the cloud is fundamentally different to what you're doing today on premises. The great thing is you're not going to have to worry about that giant rat's nest of cables that have somehow magically appeared in your data centers, firmware updates, driver revisions, all that kind of stuff that you're doing, the stuff that I've lost literally weeks of my life to, getting calls at 2 in the morning because an update hasn't gone through properly, all that kind of stuff is generally going to be a thing of the past for you. So I can tell you that that is definitely a big upside for going to cloud. But the downside, of course, is you're going to be having to really understand the new world that you're moving into, and working out what pieces are really key to a successful environment, and that includes both your business as usual environment and also what happens in case you do unfortunately suffer some kind of DR incident. All of these things need to be taken into consideration before you do any low-level design stuff, and I can't stress that enough. Yes, we can make really nice designs, we can put together an absolutely super robust plan around what we're going to do and what that looks like in every eventual situation, but honestly, as we move to cloud, there are some options there that you may not have considered now. So this guy loved it when the plan came together. If you don't know who this is, I'm not sure I knew the crowd as well as I thought I did. But I also love it when a plan comes together. And for me, the key to a good HA&DR plan is to have that holistic plan. We're not going in at that base level. We're not dealing off with individual infrastructure items first. We're just pulling back, and we're taking a view from 10,000 meters. When it comes to end user environments, it's very rare in my experience, especially in larger businesses, that you're going to be in full control of every single aspect of that environment anyway. A good HA&DR plan, of course, involves a number of items that you are going to be responsible for, and you must take into consideration those pieces, but absolutely it's also key to zoom out, and you really need to understand the bigger picture, and also, importantly, be realistic in its goals and in its scope. There is no benefit to having a Rolls-Royce super-duper cast iron 100% uptime guaranteed plan if the business is not going to sign it off. It's just a complete waste of everyone's time, and I'm sure we've all had those conversations where people are talking about wanting everything, but no one's there to support that case, and it can be tricky conversations to have, right? So this is quite funny. So this is Interesting. I was looking for a really generic kind of stock picture of business people for this slide. And again, I was on the highway in my little meme pic at the beginning, and I just took another massive diversion off to, you know what, actually, let's look at this slide for more than a couple of seconds. What are we really seeing here? We're seeing, for me, a very accurate representation of the modern workplace, other than the fact that they're all around a wooden table. That's not from anywhere I've worked before, and certainly moving into the new world, most people probably aren't even in the same room. But it's a similar concept, and we can see here that actually we've got a couple of people on laptops, we've got a couple of tablets, we've got some people on phones, shock horror, some guys actually just using a pen and paper. So yeah, we can see here this is really actually quite a good representation for me of the modern workplace, the way people are interacting with IT on a daily basis, and the way that we deliver the services to the users now has to change, and the things that we're used to doing potentially may not work anymore because things are evolving. People are used to having things on their phone. People are used to being able to get to things on their tablet. Yes, we can deliver a Windows app to a tablet. Yes, we can deliver a Windows app to a phone. But you know what? That is horrible. No one wants to use a Windows desktop on a phone. It doesn't make any sense. We've been able to do this for, I don't know, maybe 15 years now. Is anyone doing it? No, because it's rubbish. No one wants to do it. So if we're just delivering the same services we've always delivered, how does that apply to someone using a tablet or a phone? Like, it's not what we need to do. It's 2025. We're almost moving to 2026 now. We need to understand in an HA and DR scenario what is being provided and what can we provide to these users to kind of really make a difference to them and keep them working. So we're going to begin driving out some good information really around who is using the systems and what they could survive on in an HA and DR scenario. So what is really important to them? The what is really key here is when we begin to go down the road of what do they need to survive when they go down this path? What can we get by with? What can the business support? What will the business allow people to do when the chips are down? Which brought me onto this. This is an interesting screenshot. And I feel like this as a desktop is not a million miles away from potentially where you are if you build a Rolls-Royce VDI solution. You're probably thinking, Sean, that's insane. Why would you say that? The truth is, even if we can get you to a full virtual desktop, right, what's happening with your applications? Where are your apps? If you've been forced to move to the cloud, there's a good chance your business apps and the back ends for those apps have also either on cloud or they're beginning their journey to cloud. So are the apps even resilient? If you lose a region in Azure, what are all of these individual app owners? What are these app responsibilities? The guys who are looking after these different pieces of infrastructure that are supporting the back end of the apps, what is happening to those? Are they going to be available? What is the holistic benefit of delivering a full-featured desktop with every single setting and every single client application on it if when the user logs in, all they can get to is Notepad and Calculator and none of their business apps? That's not a scenario that helps anyone. So you can begin to put those things into your conversations around, well, you know what's really important? Is it important that we give everyone a full desktop or a full set of published apps? Or do we concentrate on giving them a better experience? Questions like where do they need to work from? Do they have to be in the office? Can they do it from home? What about a mobile device? Everyone has a mobile device. Everyone has multiple mobile devices. Is there an appetite for the business in this age of mobile apps and SaaS apps, even if the business does not tolerate this stance during business as usual? There may be exceptions that can be made in a DR scenario. when COVID hit, we all got plunged into this very tricky situation where no one really knew what they had to do to keep things going. But I think a lot of us in the industry, we just kind of got on with it and we did it and we kind of made it work. And that really opened the gates to me around conversations and around senior business leaders understanding that actually during a disaster type event, it's more valuable to get people on and working than concentrating on delivering them exactly the same experience that they had before. Because the world has changed. People, unless you're in a very highly regulated industry that absolutely has to guarantee uptime or whatever, otherwise you're going to lose your licenses, whatever field that's in, it's going to be really difficult to get budget for those things moving forwards. Everyone, at least everyone I've talked to, I mean, I'm sure, let's get a show of hands in this room, who has heard the phrase, we need to do more with less in the last year? Right? And that doesn't mean you need to spin up more virtual desktops just in case there's a disaster. That's just not something that is feasible. It's not something that businesses are willing to support, even if they're not turned on. Even if there's all kinds of other things we can do to try and save costs, there's always going to be a cost to that. There's cost of overhead, there's cost of running it, there's cost of keeping it up to date, all those things. No one wants to support those costs. And when do we need to get back to normal? That can be during the DR situation. What are the expectations of the business around your recovery time objectives? So how quickly can we get back up and running? And your recovery point objectives, so how much lost work can the business really tolerate? That's really critical information, and I've had a lot of conversations with customers over the last 6 months where they've asked me, can we have the all singing, all dancing? Can we get the highly available installation of your software? Can we make sure it's fully resilient? Yeah, we can do that, but you know what? What's your RTO? What's your RPO? Where do we need to get back to? What's your known good? How much failure can the business tolerate before something becomes a problem? You know what? Most people don't know. They haven't gone to the business. They haven't asked what is the appetite to balance the cost of delivering perfect uptime and perfect reliability and a perfect rollback position against the bottom line cost of that. And of course, again, going back to the holistic conversation, this has to be aligned with your applications and your data. Because like I said, giving someone a full desktop with their business applications in, but without any of the backends for your business applications, is not going to be of any value to your business. And that is what you will be judged against, is the value to your business. Unless you've got some crazy agreements that say, congratulations, you managed to get the virtual desktop to 100% of the workforce in a DR situation, but no one could use any of their apps. It's almost useless. Is that a bit disingenuous? Yes, we all know there's things you can do on a computer, right? But a lot of them involve other things. Even to the point where I've seen customers who have environments and they're still looping things back to on-prem. They still have proxies for their internet access going back on-prem. If they lose that on-prem site, nothing's going to work because nothing can get out to the internet. A load of their apps are not going to work. A lot of the things that they're doing on their desktops, even though we kind of expect them to just work through a browser now, they're not going to work if they're kind of delivering the same experience. So what does that experience look like when things are not running correctly? Because that's one of the big takeaways from DR. Things tend not to fail nicely. They fail messily, and they don't always fail in the ways you expect them to. And you need to think about those things as well when you're beginning to kind of design and think about these environments. And that's why, for me, you need to begin categorizing those kind of personas, those use cases, what it is they need to do, and what is the appetite for the business to support those users, and what does support really look like for them in a DR scenario. So, as I was working through this presentation, I already had a section around costs. We obviously touched lightly on costs earlier, but I wasn't quite sure how or when it would appear. as part of this process, when we're looking into who your users are, what they need to do, what they need to access, what applications they need to get to do their job, how can we ensure they can continue to work during a DR situation in general? Why are we talking about costs now? Well, obviously we've got these amazing requirements, we've got this Rolls-Royce design, everything's super robust, let's get it deployed. And then obviously our friend here, he's stepped into the room and absolutely no one is going to sign this off. Like, the costs are unimaginable, the business is not going to align with you on this Rolls-Royce solution. So what can you do to this? Part of the transition to cloud, it brings increased focus around cost, especially as you're probably going to be moving away from that kind of standard set cost type model. You've got all your stuff on prem, it's all paid for, you kind of know that cost is in the bag, and you're moving to that kind of more consumption-based world where you are going to be nickel and dimed for every kind of little thing, every move that you make in those environments. And it's interesting because I used to treat that as a real negative, but actually, as I've gone through some of these conversations with people that are running teams, with senior leadership, actually increased focus on cost can be a real benefit for you if you're going in and designing these environments, if you're responsible for having to support these large groups of users moving forwards. The business will very quickly let you know on a financial basis what isn't important for the business to continue running, what functions are really important. And this isn't just what you think is important, this is what the business will sign off and make appropriate financial commitments to back up those assessments. So you're not on your own when you do things, when you go through these discussions. You have the backing of the business to make sensible decisions in your environment. And when you go into other conversations with other people, with other businesses, with other peers inside your organization, you're armed, you have the correct items and information that you need to focus your conversations, especially around those RPO and RTO items that are really going to potentially bloat costs and potentially get you into a situation where you end up with a useless desktop. And it will be really helpful for you so that not only you decide what's important, but also so that what you end up knowing is important is on the same page as what the business thinks is important. And that's really key, because sometimes if you look at the bottom level and you're concentrating on things like, how do I back up the key vault? How do I get SQL back up and running? You will not be on the same page as the business. And when something goes horribly wrong, you will not align, and it will be way too late to do anything about it by that point. So, what can you do? What can you do about it? Let's have a look at this pretty generic looking pyramid of cloud computing here. Apologies, I've just ripped some of these images straight off the internet with no accreditation. I can't remember where this one came from, but that's bad practice, apologies. But let's have a quick look at this pretty generic looking pyramid of cloud computing items. What have we got? So very clear, I like it, that's why I chose it. It's simple like me. We've got kind of your SaaS pieces at the top, mainly related to your end users. We've got your PaaS pieces in the middle, so your platform services. I really struggled to find a picture that didn't just have developers. I don't agree with that. I understand why it's there, but there's a lot of cloud services that we use on a regular basis that are platform services that are absolutely nothing to do with developers, but that's fine. And then at the bottom, we have the nice, comfy world, the aaS, the bits that we know, the bits that we're comfortable dealing with, the bits that we're really at home with kind of configuring and setting up and controlling. And as we can see down the right-hand side, as we move up the pyramid, we begin to lose control over some of those things. And it can be uncomfortable, and I get that. I've been doing this for almost 5 years now, moving to cloud. And it can be really uncomfortable. Like, I was diehard on-prem tech, hate everything cloud. I saw some benefits, but it can be really difficult to let go. So I entirely understand that. So The top layer has to be where you start. You can't start at the bottom. It just doesn't work. You're never going to reach a sensible set of decisions for every type of your personas by talking about what individual components you need to protect at the bottom layer. It's the wrong approach. So the approach has to be top down. So let's start at the top layer. If your end users are largely using SaaS services, do you really need to provide them with published applications or a full virtual desktop, especially in a DR scenario? Yes. During normal business as usual operations, the business wants everyone to use a virtual desktop. But you know what? Technology's really moved on. There's some really great options out there. I think Microsoft, to give them their dues, it's very rare that I say this, I don't know if there's any Microsofties in the house. I think Microsoft have done a great job with a number of technologies that they've released in the last 5 years. AVD, Windows 365, even Intune. I'm sure there's a lot of Intune haters here, I get it, but actually largely as a technology, it's pretty good. It'll get you to where you need to get, even if it's eventually after 8 hours or a day, but it'll do it, and it's a lot easier than setting up SCCM and doing this at scale. And there's conversations you can have. You can have conversations with risk people. You can say, right, we know that during normal business, we have to let users in only using the virtual desktop. But can we have a look at potentially different sets of conditional access policies? What risk profile would be tolerated? Maybe you're in an industry where there's no risk profile that's tolerated. Everyone has to have a virtual desktop. That's fine. I'm sure we've all worked in some of those companies before. I'm just saying, when you look at your personas, maybe you haven't looked at them for 5 years. Maybe you haven't looked at the technology stack that they're using. Maybe you're not fully aware of the applications they're using today. Have another look. Maybe things have changed. Maybe things have changed internally in the business. Maybe some of those applications that you think you have to support today, you don't have to support anymore. Maybe they can go SaaS. Maybe you can have a look at some of those conditional access pieces in Entra and begin logging into some of these SaaS apps in a DR situation without having to use a virtual desktop. What does that look like? I can't tell you, I don't know, but it's definitely something that's worth looking into, because you know what's easier than spinning up another 100,000 VDIs? Getting people to log in from their tablets, laptops, mobiles, whatever that looks like. I think Microsoft have done a great job, especially around the Office suite. Using MAM policies to protect things on personal devices, I think is brilliant. The sooner they can bring that to full-fat laptops, I think that'd be amazing. That'd be really good technology to have if we can get there. Yes, we can enroll laptops, but yes, then we have to worry about all of the other stuff that's associated with that and compliance. I just think MAM is a really good way to get around some of those hurdles. And certainly a lot of businesses today, they will be able to get away with, where's Nige, order of the day, a secure browser and SaaS apps. I mean, secure browser is basically a SaaS app, right? So a lot of users today will be able to get away with that. So if that's not something you've considered today, there's a reason why secure browsers are gaining traction. There are many products in the market today. There will be even more tomorrow that will all do some kind of secure browsing. And the reason for it is exactly for this. As more businesses begin to move away from specific line of business apps to SaaS, this is the world that we're expected to move into today. So, as we move into the middle layer, this is where things get a bit more murky. Can I move this? Is this a touch screen? No, it's not. As we move into the middle layers, things get a little bit more murky, right? So we've got some services that kind of masquerade as PaaS, and they do a bit of IaaS management, and they also do some SaaS pieces as well. So the instant example that comes to mind is going to be something like Citrix Cloud, which kind of straddles all three of these layers here. It's delivered to you by Citrix. It's a platform you can use to manage your end user environment, and it's very much taken control of some of that lower end IaaS stuff as well. Nerdio is very similar. It's basically running its own software. Is it SaaS? Not really. It's more PaaS, and it's kind of sitting on top of some of these AVD layers that are provided by Microsoft for AVD and Windows 365 and Intune. And again, I think that there's elements of kind of SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS that are all part of this model. And you need to do assessment around which parts of these products you're really in control of. And you know what? Some parts of these products you're just not in control of anymore. Like, we've really changed. We've moved, the world has moved, and we've moved into a different area where, I get it, we've all owned and we've looked after and we've babied and we've grown up with these products, and we may hate them or we might really like them, but you know what? There are products, and we're kind of fully in control of all of the aspects of these products, and they kind of sit in our data centers, and we know them. And like I said, and even if we hate them, we kind of still know them. So like, if there's a problem, we already know that this is always a problem and this is how we fix it, and we're just kind of really used to being hands-on and like really fully in control of everything. And I guess my point around that is that's why I think we all start at the bottom. We all start in that aaS layer, because that's what we're really comfortable with. That's what we know. That's what we're used to doing. And I guess one of my key takeaways for this whole presentation is really around having to let go. You're going to have to let go. I think in end user compute, we've been really lucky. We've been in an industry that's not stagnated. It's always changing. We're always getting new things to play with, new technologies to waste our time with and assess that they're completely pointless. There's a lot of things in our space, but it never stops, and it's always changing. And I've run into too many people who have forgotten that, and they're just, even though this is arguably one of the biggest shifts we've seen in the industry for a long time, I mean, it's almost like we've come full circle, right? We had mainframes, then we went to kind of like server-based computing and virtualization, and then we went to kind of laptops, and now we're kind of moving everything back into one of these 3, potentially 4, 5, 6 hyperscalers, and everything's going back into areas that are not really inside your control, and you're just kind of an operator at a terminal somewhere. And we just need to kind of learn how to let go a little bit and understand that we've survived in this industry for a really long time, not by stagnating, but by continually improving and learning new things. And that's the thing that has worried me slightly, is the number of people who've forgotten that, and they've forgotten how to survive, and they're just doing the same thing. And the same thing in cloud will probably not work for you. It's just not a good approach. And I just really wanted to hammer home the point that when we're talking about HA and disaster recovery as we move workloads to cloud, the way that we do things and the way that we've always done things, you know what, maybe that's just not the right way anymore. And we need to kind of reassess those things. So, thanks, mate. So, just asked a load of questions throughout the talk. I'm not sure if anyone picked up on all of them, but there's an old journalistic principle called the 5 Ws and an H. Like I said, it was originally used by journalists to ensure they kind of captured all parts of a story, but actually, I think they're really applicable to problem solving and general business decision making. And I think it's important to consider all of these questions when we're reassessing our journey to cloud and our end user environments as they go through this transitional phase. So what are the questions? What am I talking about? First is who. Who are my personas? What are they up to? What is their job role? What apps do they need? What are they getting up to? Those are the personas there, right? What do they need to do their work? What is their daily apps? What does their workflow look like? What can they get away with in a DR situation? Where do they need to be able to work from? That can be simple as they've got to be in the office, no discussion. Fine, you know what? At least you've got the data there, you know exactly what's going on with that persona, and if there's a DR scenario, they're going to have to come into the office, but that's fine. 99% of the chats that I have with people, they don't have a lot of the answers to these quite simple questions for any of their personas. They might not have done any persona mapping at all. When do we need to get back to normal? Do we need to get back to normal in the DR situation? Or, can we cope with normal systems not being up for 2 days? Can we get away with just Office and Teams and a web browser? Is that an acceptable fallback position for a few days? I think we had a really interesting 15 minutes from Igel earlier around, you know what, sometimes you just need to be able to get back into a functioning endpoint. Sometimes you just need to be able to get to something. And if the only thing you have to rely on is that virtual desktop, you know what, you've really made a rod for your own back there, because you're going to have to bring up all of your virtual desktops in a DR scenario to get back to known good working state, because you don't have any of this information. What can you get away with? What is going to work for you at a minimum, and how long can you handle that for? And finally, why? Why do they need access to this? It's not a question normally that you can answer on your own, and that's why I brought in the cost thing, because that's absolutely a cost driver. Why does this person have to have access in a DR scenario, specifically in this moment where everything else is going wrong, to do their job? Can it wait? Is it a report that only runs once a week? That's obviously not important at all. Speaking to other members in the business, senior leadership, people who are responsible for risk, they will have budget attached to ensuring that people are able to get in and do their work. And you'll be able to provide great clarity, and it will really drive home your decision making around what is and what isn't important in your end user environments. And finally, we have how. How am I going to support each of these use cases, each of these personas, based on the information that I have? And I really feel that you cannot claim to have a good understanding of what is required for your HA&DR solution until you have an answer for each of these questions. Only then can you really begin to build an appropriate level of resilience into your solution in cloud. So I'm going to hit home my final point again. You're going to have to let go, that you're in control of everything. Let's bring up some fun logos. Who has heard of all of these companies? Presumably everyone has heard of all of these companies. And all of these companies have suffered absolutely massive cloud outages or caused outages of some kind in the last couple of years. What could you have done about them? Absolutely nothing. That's just the truth of the world that we've moved into, to be honest with you. I get it. Absolutely, we should be invested and we should be interested in designing systems that are as robust as possible. I'm all about that. I love having these conversations with people. But there's a huge number of factors in cloud that just make things sometimes impossible, whether that's a technical impossible, a budgetary impossible, whatever that looks like. Sometimes your hands are just tied. When we're talking about moving to cloud, we only really have control of certain items at that bottom layer. If there's stuff that's happening at the layers above that, if there's services you're using that are perhaps failing, you're not in control of, you're just going to have to accept that you can't stop all of the problems all of the time. The most negative connotation I heard recently was someone saying, "Not my problem." But it doesn't have to be a negative. It doesn't have to be synonymous with "I don't care." You absolutely can care, but you know what? It's not my problem isn't always a negative. It's just a symptom of the world that we're moving towards now. And it's taken me probably about 5 years to be okay with that. But I encourage all of you to think about what I've said today. Even if you throw it in the bin, that's fine. But I think it's really key to kind of changing how we think about and how we approach some of these conversations in businesses. Because the world has also changed. And if something goes wrong, you know what, sometimes it's just not your fault, there's nothing you can do about it, and you just need to let that lowest layer go. You're not in control of the things above that, it's just part of the world. The business has made this decision. People who are paying for it have essentially made this decision. It ain't personal. And that's all from me. Thanks very much for coming. Apologies if it wasn't the kind of session that you were expecting. I promise that my next session will absolutely be fully in the technical and fully around things that you need to do and how you would protect certain components and how you hang together a virtual desktop environment in cloud. But yeah, if you scan the code, you can leave feedback. In fact, if you have the app, you can leave feedback. And I'll try and make sure as many of your queries get answered next time, assuming I'm allowed back. Thank you very much.